So the next step is to trim our lining. Now, most instructions you find out there are going to say whatever you use for your lining, use for your pockets, and use for your shoulder straps. I, of course, have to be a little bit difficult. I'm not going to do that because I love, this is my moon phase lining, but I don't think I want that for my outside pockets and for my straps just because it's white. It'll show a lot of staining, anything that gets on it. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this for my lining, and then I'm going to use, I have a galaxy with some stars that I think will better serve my straps in my pocket. So that's what I'm going to be cutting, so bear with me. Okay, so the lining, again, it's a pretty simple pattern that we're doing here. We're doing exactly what I have. So I have my selvage side up. I'm gonna lay this nice and flat. I'm going to press this after I cut it because this is a little wonky. It's been folded for a while. So again, you're just gonna lay that flat and fold your bag in half, which hopefully folds nicely. Knowing that we're going to trim that selvage away, but make sure that that feels good. Take my ruler, get this nice and straight along this edge. Remove what we've just spent an hour quilting away and trim this off. I'm going to press it real quick, get all these fold wrinkles out. So then you want to refold your selvage lines because we want to trim that off. We do not want to be sewing the selvage. So let's trim that off. That's my lining fabric ready to go. And now I have to cut handles. So handle strips we want to be 4 inches wide, and you need 4 of them. So again, first I'm going to true up this fabric, and then I'm going to trim off this selvage, getting my pieces out of the way. Don't ruin any of the work if it's done. And you're going to be, we're cutting 4 strips. We'll be sewing 2 together. And determining the length. So first I'm going to cut my 4, and I don't know if I found life is easier if I use a ruler, but I'm going to do this method. So pick this trick up somewhere on the internet. So rather than cut on the right side, put your ruler over on this side. So you're going to line up, because this is now squared. So you're going to line up your 4-inch line on your fabric. 1, 2, 3, 4. This line right here. With it to the left of your fabric. So don't short yourself. And now to cut the pockets. So to determine your pocket size, you need to decide 2 things. 1, how far up from the bottom do you want to start, and how big of a pocket do you want. So I know I'm going to want a pretty sizable, probably almost 4-inch bottom. So if I already go up 2 inches from this fold, this is going to be a square bottom, I know I don't want to come any lower than there. And if I come right to that 2-inch line, I'm going to be right at the bottom of the bag. So I'm probably going to go for right about here. As far as size, again, that's another thing up to you. You can do the same size on both sides. You could do a smaller pocket up higher, a larger one lower. I think I'm going to keep it fairly symmetrical. I'm going to cut my fabric to be the same size. So you're going to take your pocket fabric and just take it up to that fold line. And we're going to do a double fold. So we're going to use both sides of this. So just trim this at your fold line. And then this is where you're going to determine your pocket size. So you can do, again, you can have one into the seam, you could have one higher, one lower. So I think that's what I will do, is just do them up. And now it is time to make our straps. So we're going to put our pockets aside with our bag over there. You can make really long handles, not so long handles. It's going to be completely up to your preference. So we are going to put our 2 fabric strips together and sew them together real quick, just straight across. Trim any excess that you may have if you go a little further in than you wanted to. And then we are going to take it over to the ironing board and of course with the right sides facing out, fold it over and just press that. Okay, so we've sewn our handle strips together. They are very long, don't worry, you can trim to your liking. So now I'm going to trim some of this excess off actually, and you don't have to be precise on this. I'm just gonna trim some of that off because we just needed them connected. I just made someone cringe cutting at my fingers, but it's okay. And let's do this one. I was going to say I'm a professional, but not yet. Okay, so we want to go 1/4 inch in, so not too far. And again, make sure you're pressing your good side is face down. And we will just eyeball this and then keep it straight, because what we're going to do is lay our piece of inch batting down and then wrap this end over and this end over, and then just quickly quilt the straps, if you will, anchor that batting in to assemble our straps. So again, you can see I'm not measuring this, I'm just pressing that in. So you want to lay your batting sort of where that 1/4 seam is. So not under it, but just sort of to the edge of it. And we're just going to tuck this batting in. Now, so again, you want to keep in mind, we're going to be folding this and then just a little overlap from folding, so it's really going to be quite a seam right there on the edge when you sew your first. When we really go to anchor this, we're going to want to be really close to that fold. And if I measure this, you want a nice hearty 1-inch strap. This actually gives me a little bit more, which I prefer. I would rather have a slightly wider strap. So it's going to be an eyeball. It's not going to be precise. Okay, that worked pretty well. No real issues. So I'm going to go ahead and I think she wants to do 2 more rows to anchor this batting in here. Then I'll do the other strap. So you can see, I mean, it turned a little bit, but it's closed right along that edge. So I'm going to put it back through 2 more times, again, doing on either side of that seam, and I'm just going to use my presser foot as my guide. So after we've trimmed up with those straps, the next is going to be our pockets. So remember, we have our 2. You have to decide where you're going to want to place it. I'm going to go about 4 or 5 inches from the bottom, because I know my bottom is going to end up getting folded out to make a nice bottom. So I think I'm going to go 5 inches. But before we even get to that point, we actually, because we're doing a double pocket, we want to flip this sort of inside out. So your fabric facing itself, and we're actually going to sew this shut. Okay, so we'll get it inside out and just do a quick seam to close that up. Turn this one back inside out, or right side out. Put this one together. Okay, so after you've sewn those shut real quick, we're going to turn them right side out again, and we just want to go press here where we've just sewn that seam, just to get it to lay nice and flat. Once you've pressed your pocket, both top and bottom, you want to press that seam and also the top, just to make sure we've got a nice crisp pocket. We are going to place our pocket on the bag. So like I said, I know I want a pretty decent bottom, so I'm going to set mine about 5 inches up from the bottom, and I'll show you mine in a minute. You just want to gauge and make sure that it is the width you want. Keeping in mind, we're going to sew our straps actually over the pocket, so you will lose a little bit of that depth as we sew our handles on. So you can see I'm just sort of placing it here. I'm going to use my jelly roll strips as my ruler of sorts. Again, you want to make sure seam down on your handle. You want about 1 inch hanging over the edge here. And overlap, I like to overlap about halfway. So take it up. You are going to want to pin, and you want to stop your pin. So I'm going to pin at both my pockets and at the bottom, just to make sure it stays secure. You want to come in all the way to the bottom here because this will be wrapping under. So you do want to pin. So I'm going to pin here at the base, and that has the seam from where I sewed my 2 pieces together. I'm putting that here at the bottom. So I'm going to put it about here. Make sure that feels straight. I want about 1 inch hanging off. I want to cover about 1/2 of that edge with that. Bringing the strap up, and again, laying it so you've got seam side down. This is where you want to double check your length. If you look, you can see this is going to be a pretty considerable length, but I prefer to have my bag hanging down so I can reach, you know, so you can get it right there. So I'm going to pin this in place. Pin down here just to make sure. Definitely want these straps. You want everything to be straight here. Avert catastrophe. So I'm using my jelly roll strips sort of as my guide as well. And when it comes to pinning it at the top, we're actually going to stop about an inch from the top here. We're not going to sew it all the way up to there. So I'm going to stop about an inch from that top. To leave room for the finishing that we're going to do. Again, so you're going to flip it over. You want to start at your bottom where you've got your overhang. Because remember, we are stopping about an inch from that top. So I just want to show, you want to start your sewing right at the edge of this one. We're going to go all the way down till about 1 inch from the top, snip it off, come back, and we're going to sew on the other side. So that will catch then our pocket and get that all sewn in. Other side done. Once I have those straps on, I'm also going to just go across my bottom of my pocket just to sew that shut and give it a good base at the bottom. So I'm going to go fairly close to that edge then, just to make sure I get as much pocket as I can. I'm going to use my presser foot as my guide to keep that nice and straight. So that way I can put something down on there and know it's not going to fall out. Okay, so we're going to repeat on the other side. We have one side done, so even if, you know, before we put it together, you can see with the lengths that I had, this is a good, I'll be able to drop something. And if I need to real quick, great length for the pocket. My fingertips go right to the bottom of that pocket, so that was a good one. So I'm going to prep my other side. Of course, definitely want to make sure when you get the other side together, your point of reference is going to be this length. So you want to make sure after you've got it pinned that your straps are going to be at the same length. Also want to make sure, because I know it would drive me crazy, that I want to make sure my jelly roll strips are on the right sides. It is time to assemble our bag. So we're going to put both pieces facing each other. So you're going to put them facing each other, get everything aligned. And at the bottom, we want to do about a 1/2 inch seam. Across that bottom. We are going to pin this just to keep it in place. So we are going to make a bit of a quilt sandwich. We want to make sure we also sew over the straps at the bottom. So we're going to go completely across the top. Using a 1/2 inch seam, making sure we do a really good back stitch as well. And do the same on either side. Then once we're done, we can trim off these handles because we won't need that anymore. Okay, now you want to make sure you remove those pins before we go any further, or you'll be sewing your lining into a safety pin bag.